Testament, and then go to Romans, go to chapter 12, and go to verse 2. We're going to be in one verse today, and as you're going there, if I have not yet met you, my name is John. I'm the lead student pastor here, which means I'm one of the old guys on our student team. Every once in a while, you get me when Connor gets emotionally spent by being up here, and I give him a break, and I'm here with you guys today. I'm excited to do that, and one thing about me, as you're going to Romans 12, and this is true of a lot of people, but my number is 3, meaning that is the number of girls and then later and or women that I dated before I dated and eventually married my wife. My wife was not the first person that I dated. And in high school and in college, I wasn't necessarily like the serial dater guy, meaning like I didn't just hop in just to do it because I thought it'd be fun. I always naturally, by personality, bent more towards the probably a little bit, honestly, overly intense end of like, hey, let's see how long this can go. Like, let's go all the way. And so you can imagine with that natural personality, how quickly I convinced myself as I dated these people that I was so certain she was the one. Bro, I was certain. I knew it. Like a lot of things in life, I allowed my emotional attachment and my connection to this girl and or woman as I was in high school and then college. Like, I allowed this emotional connection just to begin to tell me things, right? I'm not alone in this. This happens to all of us to some degree. And so I'm beginning to get convinced that like, she's it. And then of course, 100% she wasn't, or a better way to say that was, I was clearly not for her. That was most of the problem. And I and her ended up, we were no longer dating. And then next person comes along and I'm like, this one is gonna be different. And it was not, like at all, until eventually there's one that was, right? Like, so in my dating life, my emotions were batting 1 out of 4. Like, if that makes sense, right? Like, my batting average was 250 for those that remotely care about baseball and know what I'm talking about. So like 1 out of 4 times, I got it right. And honestly, the 4th time is I mainly got it right because God is gracious and he was like, you're still an idiot, but here you go, right? Like, that's clearly what happens as I got a massive upgrade in my life, and I'm not sure convinced my wife got the same, right? Like, upgrade for me felt like a bit of a downgrade for her. And so I enter into this relationship, and each and every time, my emotions led the way, and of course this is what I thought. And the reason I bring up this part of my life is not to also self-deprecatingly embarrass myself, but it is to be honest that one of the things that was true of me in that moment, or those multiple moments, and is true in our life, is that our emotions, what we feel, is very real. And it can be very intense, and it can last for a long time. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. See, what you and I feel is real, but often our feelings do not tell us the truth. See, we've been in this series called Know and Make Known, where what we've been doing, kind of in partnership, like a whole church has been doing this, is we've been walking through a series on how you and I view the world. Another word for that, in one word, is our worldview, meaning the lens through which we see everything and what we think is true about ourselves and what we think is true about the world, what we think about is true about God, what we think is true about each other, what we think is true and right and good. And we've been walking through this with really kind of one big hope, and it has a couple parts to it. Our hope has been that you and I would increasingly know and love what is true. But then at the same time, we would also live out what is true. So it's not just a thing that we intellectually understand, but it becomes a thing that we do trust and we live out. But on top of that, that not only would we live it out, but we would come to be so confident in what is true that we would begin to have the confidence to say it to someone else. That's been our heart and our hope as we go through this series. And the kind of the way we've gone about it is we've done it by kind of holding up 2 things at the very least. We have held up, and we will continue to hold up, the lies that you and I are told in the world that we live in. And it's not just something that's external, it's also internal. Any lie that we're told and we adopt isn't just because we were lied to, it's because we also wanted the lie. We liked what it was selling, so we're like, that sounds great, I'll take that. So we've held up the lie, but also we want to lovingly hold up what is true. explain why the lie doesn't work, why it doesn't hold up, but also not only why is God's truth beautiful, but it holds together, it works in real life. It leads to life and freedom for you and I. So it's true, but also beautiful, and it works. And we're going to kind of hold up that today. And where we're going to go today is we want to talk about the things that you and I feel. Now as we go through this, one of the things that I know is that, especially when we talk about feelings and things like that, sometimes it can be really abstract. It can feel like it's not grounded in real life. I'm going to do my best to ground it in real life. But as you have questions throughout this series, we're going to have 2 times where we're going to do Q&A, both on a Wednesday night, on a Sunday morning. And so on your bulletin, as you came in, there's a QR code on the front of it. Just scan that. If at any point something that I say really challenges something you thought, or you're like, I have no idea what John is talking about, help me understand that better, just ask a question. We're going to do our best over those Q&As to answer your guys' questions, to put a little flesh and blood and skin on the things that we're talking about. And so here's what Romans 12:2 says. This is real easy. All we got is one verse. Here's what it says. Paul, writing to the church in Rome, he says, do not be conformed to this world, but instead be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. What is good, what is acceptable, and what is perfect. See, where you and I have been going, if you have been here in this series, you will hopefully remember that we opened with the biggest lie of all. The biggest lie that you and I are told is that there's no truth that applies to all people. This is week 1, just simply meaning that we believe that truth is personal, right? My truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. I'm going to live my life, you live your life. We're just going to all do what we want. And if you hold on to the idea that truth is personal, it naturally leads to this next idea. So notice how they build on each other. If truth is just personal, then very clearly, Jesus and his Bible, they're not relevant or final, right? At some point, you and I have to pick what has final authority in our life. And if I'm the final authority in my life, then no way am I picking this, right? Like, it's either this or me, and our tendency is to pick me, right? To go, I'm the final say. But this leaves us with a really, really, really interesting question. See, if there is no truth that is universal to everybody, if it's just personal, and if his Bible actually isn't relevant or final for you and me, at the end of the day, you still have to make choices. We all make them every day, right? Hopefully we all intrinsically understand that. So let me ask the question, where do you go? What do you use to decide what is good and pleasing and perfect? What do you use to decide what's true? See, and if truth is personal, the Bible has no say, then here's where it inevitably leads. It leads to this place. It leads to the place that my feelings are the final authority on what's true. Right? What I feel becomes the thing that I use to determine what is real and good and true in my life. Right? So notice again how they build on each other. Right? If someone is here, even in the smallest way, your feelings become the top thing you use to determine what's real and good and true and all of that, then that means that somewhere along the process, and you might actually be unaware of it, somewhere in there, you started to believe that truth was personal, and so it naturally leads to this place. Ideas lead us places. They're built on each other. And as we go through the series, you might actually notice that. If you stay here for the whole thing, you'll notice, if you write out each week, you'll notice how they all build on each other. And this idea right here, absolutely, though it is not directly referenced, this is an idea that absolutely falls into the category of what Paul talks about in Romans 12:2, the pattern of this world, right? The pattern of this world and the natural place of our hearts where we tend to go is we tend to go here. that my feelings are the final thing. And if that is true, then here's where this leads in our life. Let me see if this makes sense for you. See, if my feelings are the final authority on what's true, then here's how it shows up. It means that whatever I feel is who I am. I use feelings to determine my identity, my worth, my value, just who I am as a person. Let me give some examples. I'm having a terrible day, right? Things are not going well. Something happened. How quickly we go in our minds, right, to thinking that we are something worth less than we are. Of course we do that, right? Our emotions lead our sense of value and of self. That's an absolute example of something that we do. Or here's another one. All of us have things that we struggle with. And some of those struggles are really hard. There are those of us that have walked in the door today and we deeply struggle with things like anxiety or depression or whatever it be. And it's very easy for that struggle to begin to define you, right? I feel a certain way, so it becomes the primary lens through which I see myself and my world. And I'm not saying it's not real. I believe it's real and a struggle in your life. But it becomes the number one thing that determines and defines everything about us. That's a way of taking a feeling and making it the top. Okay, let me use the most personal or maybe socially difficult example of this. Let's take the phrase, a trans man is a man. I'm not going to argue whether or not at this moment, whether you agree with that idea or not. I'm not worried about that in this second. But I want you to think for a second what that idea is built on. It's built upon feeling, right? I feel that I am this, so therefore, I am this. See, if feelings are the final authority, then we use it to determine who we are. The other thing that happens is what I feel is what I have to do, right? If what I feel is what I am, then this is why it seems crazy for anyone to go to anyone else and say, hey, you should either stop or you should slow down, or honestly, in wisdom, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, this is why this seems crazy, is because it feels like what you're stopping me from who I really am. Well, who I really am has to come out. And so you've got to let me, the real me, come out. That's why it seems insane in our culture to ever go to another person and say, this isn't right. Because if what I feel is the final authority, then I have to act on it, right? Then the third one. If what I feel is the final authority, then where it leads is what I feel isn't just real, it's also final. It's not just real, it's final. Notice so far, I've never said that our feelings aren't real. They are real. They're happening in real time. Like it's really going on. And I guess I said, so often they are very strong, and we're so certain of them, or they've been going on for a long time, which can be either really great or really hard. And so they're real. But like me, when I was driving in high school, I had a tendency to blow right through stop signs because I was a high school-aged male. And so I was like, suggestion, not red, just went right through, right? That's how I drove. And we drive right through the end of this sentence. The sentence should stop. It shouldn't be a comma. It should be a period right after what I feel is not just real, period. What I feel is real. The problem is we made it final. We made it ultimate. We made it the authority above all else in our life. And it's a way of saying that I'm my own authority. God doesn't have anything to do with it. What I feel is final. So it should be real. It should just not be final. I actually agree with the very, very deep movie known as Frozen 2. It's deep, man. I'm telling you, it's about that life. Normally, I don't agree with Disney movies. If you actually watch them, you're like, this is messed up. Most of the time, the parents are dead, by the way. You notice that? Where you're like, how many people? This is kind of jacked up, man. This is for 5-year-olds. I have a 3-year-old daughter, which means I know Frozen 2. Mildly against my will, but I also find myself over time where I'm like, all right, it's not that bad. What I imagine in my head is like every dad in his 50s who's forced to listen to Taylor Swift and like later is like, all right, she's not that bad. Like that's my life with my 3-year-old daughter. And there's a line in the movie that goes like this. So the character Kristoff, if you haven't seen it, you don't know, you won't understand. But Kristoff is speaking for Sven, who speaks for Kristoff. You get me if you've seen it. And so there's a line in the movie that says, and I wrote it down so I didn't forget it. It says, you feel what you feel, and those feelings are real. It's like part of a song. Oddly enough, I actually agree. It's technically accurate. Those are real, but they're not final. They're not meant to be the thing that is final. And what I hope grows in you, both now and over time in this series, is I hope that God grows in you the wisdom to begin to see through the things that you and I are told and see them for what they really are. This idea that my feelings are the final authority on what's true, it does not hold up to even the smallest amount of scrutiny, like even the tiniest amount. That statement does not hold up, because think for just a second, look back on the course of your life. I'm a little bit older, I got some more evidence of this, but think on your life or anyone that you've ever known ever. When has that statement ever been universally true? Right? That your feelings never lied to you, you were totally right, 100% should have gotten to this relationship, it was gonna go great. Right? Like whatever it is, your feelings and my feelings, though they are real, they do not always tell us the truth. This doesn't work for any person in all of human history forever. It doesn't hold up to the smallest amount of scrutiny. Now that leaves us with the question. We're back to it. So if my feelings are real, but they don't always tell me the truth, again, I'm back at the question. Where in the world do I go? Where do you go to determine what is good and what is pleasing and what is perfect? Where are we going to go with that? Because we still haven't answered that question. And this is the truth in comparison to what we are told and what we tend to adopt. See, the truth is that I am who God says I am. And I have the purpose that He gave me. I am who God says I am, and I have the purpose that He gave me. And what this means is that what's true about me and why I exist, neither of those are created by me. They're actually given to me by the God that created me. There's a very big difference between those two things. Who I am and why I'm here. They're not created by me, they're not created by you. They're given to us as a gift by the God that made us. So look again at Romans 12:2. As I said, there's only one verse that we're going to look at, right? Look at the end of it and notice what it says. It says that you and I can discern. Some translations may use a different word. What it means there is that you and I can know, or we can learn God's will for our life. What that means is that what He wants for us, what He desires for us, what He calls us, the things He gives us. Or in other words, let's put it this way. It means that you and I can really know, like you really can know truly who you are through who God says you are. You can really know it. You and I can really know why we are here through the God that made us and gives us meaning and purpose. You can really know that. He does not hide it from us. And also, again, look back at verse 2. Look at the promise that's attached. See, when our starting place is, rather than assuming we're the authority, when our starting place is trusting who God says we are, living out the purpose He gives us, look at what the promise is. It says that then you and I will experience and live out what is good, what is pleasing, and perfect. And the word perfect there, don't only think like not bad. Think like as it should be. Think of like gears that work correctly. Think of it like a puzzle that fits together the way it should. The word perfect, it means things as they should be. And the reason that it's good and pleasing and perfect is because it's from the God who is good when we're not. It's from the God who made pleasure and what is actually pleasing, so he gets to tell us what is actually pleasing in our life. And it's perfect because it comes from the God who is perfect rather than us, because on this side of heaven we're busted, broken, sinful people. We are imperfect. So anytime that we try to define ourselves and any time that we try to ignore God and go, this is what my life's about, every time we will end up with stuff that isn't good, isn't pleasing, and isn't perfect. But when it's from him, it's the exact opposite. And one of the reasons that this is so good is how stable it is. It's very secure and stable. When we take who God says we are and the purpose he gives us, man, it's like standing on solid ground. The opposite is true when we let our emotions or our feeling be the final authority in our life. See, when our emotions and our feelings are the final authority, you know what happens? We are all over the place. We are a hot mess. Maybe not necessarily on the outside, but on the inside, we're not doing great. Because you know this, I know this, our feelings are all over the place, right? Like how many times have you gotten the exact thing that you wanted and then later completely regretted it? All the time. You're like, well, guess that was wrong. This is normal. This happens to us because we are imperfect. We're fallen. We're broken. And if you and I are led by our feelings at all times, including saying who we are, then we're all over the place. What it reminds me of is if you've ever floated down a river on an inner tube. Yeah, some of you know. Maybe you've been down Snohomish River. My family, every year we go to Bend, Oregon, if you've ever been there, and we float down the Deschutes River, and right in the middle of Bend, right in downtown, there's a spot where they built these kind of rapids. They're man-made rapids, because that's what you got to do in Central Oregon. You got to make your rapids, and so you'll see people on inner tubes. This is such a ridiculous. I wish honestly it would have been great if I brought an inner tube and put it on. I should have thought of that. But you'll see people get in these inner tubes, and so they sit down, but it's an inner tube. So it doesn't have a rudder, it doesn't have a motor, it doesn't have oars, or at least normally it shouldn't. And so if you've ever been in an inner tube, there's a current to the river, and you're in a round object. So you're doing this and going nowhere. Or if you move one arm, if you've ever done this, you just start spinning in circles down the river. And so it's great in Bend, we'll go down the man-made rapids, and we'll just watch, and people will just let the river take them wherever they go. And so you're watching people go down, and they're going, and inevitably the river takes them to the edges, and they just start bouncing against the rocks. I know I should probably go in and help them, but it's too much fun not to. And so they just go wherever the river takes them. Because again, they have no rudder, they have no motor, they've got no direction. And when you and I are led by what we feel, that's what it's like. And honestly, there are millions and millions of people that live their life like that. They live their life just getting tossed around. They have no stable footing. They don't know who they are. They don't know why they're here. And again, the truth is, that describes some of us here and now. It honestly does. Your life feels like it is all over the place because it is all over the place. It feels like you have no idea who you are because you have no idea who God says you are. It feels like I got no idea why I'm even here because you honestly don't know why God says you're here. And if that describes you in any even the tiniest way, what that should clue us into is that you and I were made to know those things by the God who sent his son as the sacrifice for our sin, who would redeem our relationship with him, bring us into right relationship with God, so that not only would he be our Savior, that we would have eternity with him, but also so that he would now lead our life. he would become our king. He would become our father. We would be adopted into his family, that he would be now the one who tells us who we are and why we are here. We need Jesus both to save us from our sins and rescue us from a life that is led by sin, which includes a life that is all over the place. He does both. That is what you and I need. We're invited into that relationship. But this still leaves us with the question, right? I've been a little bit abstract. Like, okay, John, fine. I give you that maybe this is true. I am who God says I am, and I should live the purposes that he gave me. But still, at the end of the day, you and I feel lots of things, right? You probably feel things right now, like it's a little bit warm, I'm a little hungry. I feel that too. So still it leaves us the question, on an everyday basis, what in the world do you do with what you feel? I've taken the verse in the wrong order. Look at the beginning of Romans 12, verse 2. Here's what the first half says. I'm going to read it again. He says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing, another word for that is action, then you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, pleasing, and perfect. See, what God does in his word is he reverses the order of what we normally do. And you and I have a decision to make, and the decision that we need to make is on a daily basis is to place my feelings under, keyword, under, or you could even say kind of behind, what God calls true and good. See, you and I, to live this out, we have to place our feelings under what God calls true. Here's kind of the order that we tend to live out. This is the order for all of us. Without Jesus intervening in our life anyway, this is our order. We tend to feel a thing, and then we act on that feeling, and then only later do we think about it. This is the normal human behavior. The ultimate example of this, I say this all the time. I now have a 6th grade son, so I watch this every day. Watch like a 6th or 7th grade boy. Just watch how they do life. It's all over the place. They feel a thing, and because they're like 12, they have no idea what's going on. And then they act on it, and then later, when you ask that 12-year-old boy, hey, why'd you do that? The number one answer is, nailed it, I don't know. And you know what? It also kind of never goes away a little bit. But like the funny thing is, to a degree, they're not lying. Like if I ask my son, why did you do that? And he goes, I don't know. He honestly kind of doesn't know because he didn't even think about it. He felt it, he acted on it, and then he was like, but I thought about it later. Probably shouldn't have done that. That's what we do. And on a deeper level, and probably maybe you've seen this, some people will even change their beliefs based upon what they feel, right? They have heard something. They've heard that it's true. Their mind has even accepted that it's true, but their heart doesn't want it to be true. They don't like how it makes them feel, so they reject it. We will even change our thinking based upon what we feel. But when you look at Romans 12 here, notice that it changes the order, and it reverses the order to this. Romans 12 reverses the order of what it looks like to live a life that honors God on a daily basis is one where we actually think rightly first. Notice what Romans 12:2 says. It says, transform yourself by the what? The renewal of your mind, the way you think about things, your beliefs. So transform yourself through what you think. Act rightly on what you think. And trust that over time, your feelings will play catch up. But here's also the hard truth that we've got to learn. Sometimes, and in some cases, our feelings don't catch up. But it doesn't make what is right and true any different. It doesn't make what is right and true any different. And then when you think about this order up here, it actually makes a lot of sense. Let me give an example. One of the parts of the great command that Jesus gives us is, he says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, and he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And he uses the word neighbor because he's not saying love your best friend, love the people you like. He uses the word neighbor, which includes everybody. Some of us got some weird neighbors, right? Not everybody, let's just be honest, is easy to love. And some people, let's also just be honest, are a little easier to love than others. And if you and I are waiting for our emotions to change in order to love another human being, you and I will be waiting until the day we die. We will. We just will. And I like how C.S. Lewis, who's my favorite author, he puts it this way. He says, don't waste your time bothering about whether or not you love, kind of in quotes, your neighbor. Instead, act as if you did. And as soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets that when you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. It's describing, right? This is a very, very good description of this particular truth, that you and I have to place our feelings under what God calls true and good. And within this, I want to give another disclaimer. Please hear me, because I'm afraid of another ditch we'll drive off into. At no point did I ever tell you to ignore your feelings, and at no point did I ever say that all of them are bad, right? They're just not supposed to be final. They just can't take the place of God in our life. Not all feelings are bad, right? I'm called to love my wife, and there are moments where I really, really, really love my wife, and part of it is a feeling. Of course I feel love towards my wife. There's just lots of moments where I'm called to do that, and I don't feel it. And so what I have to do is choose to put it in the right order. Sometimes our feelings are right. Sometimes they're right. Because sometimes our beliefs are right. Here's what I mean. Let me give another example. Take two things like fear and anger. There's lots of things that we're afraid of. There's lots of things that make us angry. Sometimes those are right. Because really, what fear and anger are is we think they're an emotion because we see what comes out. Like, I'm mad at that, so I act mad at that. Fear and anger are actually a belief first, before they were ever an emotion. Think of what fear and anger are. I'm afraid because I'm afraid that I think the thing that I don't want to happen is going to happen. Or I believe the thing that I do want to happen isn't. Or think of what anger is. Anger is, I wanted something to happen and it didn't, and now I'm mad about it. Or I didn't want something to happen and it did, and now I'm mad about it. But sometimes that's not wrong. There are things that make God angry, and we should also equally be angry at it. But again, it leaves you and I the question, then how do I know? How do I know if my fear is a thing I should be afraid of? How do I know if my anger is a thing that I should be angry about because God's angry about it? And then what I go back to is this truth that I place them under what God calls true and good so that I can figure out where my feelings should be placed. I have to figure out where my feelings should be placed. And part of the reason that this is hard for us to do is it is very opposite of how the world talks to us about like what something authentic is. So let's go back to the lie for a second. In our world, being authentic as a human being is acting out what's on the inside, right? That's authenticity. I'm going to live my truth. I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to reveal who I am, right? But that's not what authenticity is. Real, authentic living is thinking and doing what is right, even when my feelings are the opposite. That's actual authentic living. Let me give two examples again. So as I said, as a husband, I am called to love my wife. I'm called to love my wife. Tell me which one is a more authentic marriage? The one where I go to my wife and say, hey, honey, you know what? The authentic me today doesn't really want to do that. I'm just letting you know. So it's like not going to happen. Or option two, I go to my wife and say, honey, I know that I'm called to love you. I'm having a really hard time doing that. I'm going to do my very best with God helping me to act the way that I should be acting towards you and love you with my actions, no matter which way I feel. Which one of those is the authentic marriage? Of course, the second one, right? But that's opposite of what you and I are told in this world. Or let's take another example that just happened here earlier. Let's take the example of worship, right? There are so many Sundays where, like, I will walk into the doors of a church. I work at a church. And I come in, and I honestly ain't feeling it. I'm just not. I see the people that are on the stage worshiping, and they're all like squinting their eyes, and the hands are out, looking for a high five. And like, man, they're feeling it from the stage, right? You can just tell they're like, they're really into it. And I'm just in the front row being like, I don't got it today, man. But tell me, in that moment, which of those is authentic worship? Me manufacturing fake feelings I don't have, or me choosing in that moment, despite the fact that I don't feel it, to still worship God with my voice because it's true that he's worthy of it? Of course, the second one, thank you, Siri, for agreeing with me. So, of course, the second one is the authentic one. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus, is I think rightly, I act on it, trusting that over time my feelings will catch up. And often they do as I'm worshiping, but not every time. But I still am called to do that. And thank God, here's what makes this so good. Thank God that he goes ahead of your feelings and my feelings. I love that what he says is true about you and me goes ahead of how you and I feel about ourselves. For example, one of the things that God says in Scripture, you can look at the book of Ephesians, says that when you become a follower of Christ, when you trust Jesus' life, death, and resurrection for you, there's all kinds of identity change that happen. He calls you holy. He calls you righteous. He calls you a child of God. He says that you now have power that you didn't have before to overcome sin and struggles in your life. Okay, you know how many days I wake up and I feel like that? Maybe barely over zero. Like I don't wake up and go, man, do I feel holy and righteous today? Ah, no, not at all. I feel old and tired because I'm getting old and tired. And all I'm thinking about is all the ways I've messed up and the dumb things I've said and the apology that I give to my kids and my wife. And I don't feel like I am those things. But thank God that he goes ahead of you and me and says, I don't really care if you feel it. Still true, you are that. Man, thank God that he works that way, that he goes ahead of how we feel even about ourselves. This is why saying the phrase that I am who God says I am and I have the purpose that he gave me is one of the most freeing statements in the world. Because not only is it secure, it's not based on me and my feelings, so it's always true. Man, that is real, genuine freedom. But at the end of the day, you and I still have a decision. Who's the final authority? Your feelings or God? And it's a daily decision that you and I have to make. It is hard for us to hear that our feelings are not the final authority. It's hard because deep down we want to be the final authority on our lives. But it is good, pleasing, and perfect when it is God who tells us who we are, and it is God who tells us why we're here. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for the students that are in here. I thank you for them. I thank you that you love them way more than I do, Connor does, Hannah does, any life group leaders, their parents, everybody. That you love them so much that you sent your son in their place to die. That not only do you rescue us from our sin, but that you drag us into a meaningful relationship with you and you tell us who we are and you tell us why we're here. Lord, I admit, even myself, that there's a part of me that does not like that because, man, I want to run my life. Help us. Help us die to that. And instead, on a daily basis, trust you instead. It ain't easy. Help us. Father, we thank you that you are good in all these things and pray in your son's name. Amen. Hey, Wednesday night is life groups. We're going to talk about all this. If something didn't make sense, ask your life group leader. They probably know better than me. We will see you guys then on Wednesday at 6:30. We got food. Otherwise, we'll see you next Sunday. See ya. Enjoy the sunshine.